dog. This is Alonzo's courting buggy.
Huh.
We could also use this for Doc Baker because he had a buggy to get around.
Yeah.
And then of course the sheep. Do you want to come in?
Now then, the sheep were used for wool to make the cloth, right?
Mm-hmm. They were not, I don't know that they were meat sheep, but at least wool producers.
Yeah.
But anyway, we have Rose back here. Baby Rose is in here, and this is
Now, Baby Rose is the
lady that grows up to write these.
Rose Wilder Lane.
Rose Wilder Lane, yeah.
What is the nature of her book, or her writing?
The thing about it was Rose that convinced Laura, her mother, to put all of these stories that she had grown up with.
Yeah.
And so finally it started. I had read this book when I was in 5th or 6th grade.
Young Pioneers.
The Young Pioneers. It's a story about a man named Charles and Caroline, and they have a little boy named Charlie. And all of the things that Rose writes about, I'm reading up in Connecticut when I was in 5th and 6th grade. And then when I saw the story on the TV, I'm thinking, I've seen this before. And then I saw in the credits that they were from these books, so I quick went out looking for the books. But I thought, they've copied these stories here. Well, unbeknownst to me at the time, that was her daughter.
Right.
So, but this just happens to be one of hers, and then the American Needlework is hers also. So that's got all kinds of needlework. So she became famous for her bread too. Oh, I gotta show you this. This is a miniature. It's not miniature. It's a very young, dried out plum from the banks of Plum Creek.
Oh, okay.
Tanya, Paul, and the boys had gone out west for a military trip. Some conference or something that he was at, and they circled around and came up through Plum Creek, and where it's in one of the pictures in here, now that the banks of Plum Creek is completely dissolved and washed away, the plums are still growing. This is small because it's in July, and of course in a northern climate you're not going to have fast growing food.
Right.
That would have ripened. This would have ripened and grown, and
Okay, when you went to you've been to the little house on the prairie.
No.
Or at least where it was.
I've been to Mansfield, Missouri when Laura and Almanzo left after all this.
Okay.
I haven't been to the Prairie House yet in Kansas, but I've been to the Mansfield, Missouri.
Maybe someday you'll get to do that.
Plan on it. We need to do, this is one of those retirement trips, take a tour up to D. Smith
Yep.
and Walnut Grove in Minnesota with the girls. So, anyway, we got Laura's.
So we got Laura's house,
Yes.
and this is the
The
church.
church. Yeah, this would be the church, the Reverend Alden. They had different pastors in different locations, but he was
What kind of church was this? Baptist, Methodist,
I think
Presbyterian?
it was a congregational church because Pa and Ma were always members of a congregational church. It was some of his boots were torn, tattered, and walked through and patched so badly after the horde of locusts that had eaten everything, and he had walked 300 miles to eastern Minnesota to find work, and the money he had, the $3 on him, he was going to buy new boots with because everything was falling apart. He ended up by meeting up with Reverend Alden, saying that they were their last $3 or they'd be ready to buy a bell. So the bell that the Congregational Church is using, it's still ringing today, and it might be on a different type of church, but that's what Pa helped pay for. But Reverend Alden was always their most favorite, and so when he was like a missionary ministry. He would travel out and help get little churches started, little homes.
So was he a circuit rider?
Well, yeah, sort of, He had a family back east, although he never talks about it on the series, but he has a wife and a couple of kids, I think, back east. And but he was totally devoted to that, to taking care of them. Oh, you gotta see our little well over here, because you can actually pop this up. There's some. Kaylee didn't understand how to use this. I mean, she knew that you could reach in there and pull out that bucket,
Yeah.
and it should be full of water. But she had the best time one morning just playing with
When
this
she
bucket.
found out it was, she could wind it up.
This would go up and down even though her hand was going around, and she
Right.
was trying to get that in her mind.
That's good.
How does that work? How does
It's a
that
good lesson.
Yeah.
Rotary motion equals linear action.
Exactly.
Good thinking.
It's just
Now, this is representing a pond or something?
Yeah, just, we even had a pond out with a little pump in it and from Walmart, and I had gurgling water spraying up, and then it didn't work the second time, the second season, so I took it out because it kind of made a splattery mess, so. But anyway, it was just, and I have to
Now,
repair this.
Laura was a bit of a nature girl, right?
Well, yeah, in a way. They had their medicines that, that all came from the trees and branches and bark and stuff like that, and you had to know how to take care of your family if you were, 100 miles from nowhere.
Now, the Wilders,
Yes.
is this Almanzo's family?
No, yes. The Wilder's feed store is headed up by his older brother Royal, that didn't want to farm but wanted to be the storekeeper. And Almanzo didn't want to storekeep. He didn't want to be inside. He loved being outdoors. Being his own boss is the way he put it. A storekeeper was, a slave to the economy, to the, whatever. Of course,
Right.
his argument was, well, you're going to be a slave to the weather, yay and nay. But you always had your own food.
So what was the relationship of Mr. Edwards to this?
I just went ahead and put him here just as kind of keeping an eye out on the store while Almanzo was maybe out.
Now, where did Mr. Edwards come from?
Mr. Edwards called himself
Yeah, you told me about that.
Wildcat from Tennessee.
Okay.
And he had settled north of that 2-mile creek line boundary that the Indians said that they had gone too far south. He didn't have to move. They did. So he was able to stay down there in Indian Territory, above the northern boundary of that creek there. And later on, they didn't see hide nor hear him until one day they had gone toward DeSmet. Maybe they'd seen him in Walnut Grove, I don't quite remember. But anyway, he'd come into the town somewhere, whether it was Walnut Grove or DeSmet, and had met up with, I know what it was now. Paul had gone into the land office to have a deed made up for property in DeSmet, and ended up by bringing him home with them. And when he had looked at Mary and realized her sightless eyes, he left a $20 gold piece with them, and that was the start of her college fund. So he was important in that respect, but wasn't, a permanent fixture too much.
Okay, now we're at the cafe.
He
Now,
taught Laura how to spit, and she always loved him for that.
This is
Hester.
Mrs. Olson.
Okay.
What did she run? Am I in the right
Yes.
series here?
Yeah, Harriet Olson and Nels Olson, their real names were Owens, but she changed the names because they weren't the best of friends.
Oh, okay.
And so we have Harriet and Nels with the general store.
At the general store. So
Right.
we're actually
And
at the
this
cafe.
Yeah, now this is.
Ma worked at the cafe, right?
Yes, she did. But you know what? Earlier on, Hester Sue was running a little outdoors cafe, and they wrote this into the storyline that Hester Sue had come from Iowa, from the School of Blind, bringing some school children to
Yeah.
establish a school in Walnut Grove, or nearby in Mankato, I think. But anyway, that's how Hester Sue comes into it. And Joe Kagan is already as the blacksmith, and so they kind of finally get together. After much fussing, they finally rub the rough edges off of each other, and she finally accepts him. And then later on, in order to get Nellie that's grown in some sort of an occupation or training, they went ahead and they built.
Oh.
This is just in the series, it's not in the
Right.
books. They build a restaurant for Nellie. And then Caroline is working in that restaurant, but that's only this TV series, that's not in real life. You do? Okay. Oh, okay. Listen, whatever you need to do, I'll sign. Okay, and I'll see you tomorrow then, all right? Because I'm going to head on out. Bye, Wyatt. I've got to get back up to the house soon because I got my kids, one daughter and 2 grandsons.
Thanks for coming to be with us.
She's such a sweetheart. Take your the shawl for your doll.
Thank you so
And
much.
take that bag of books. At least they have the pictures. We'll see you tomorrow, okay? All right. We'll see see you in the morning, okay? Dress warm.
Let's finish our story with Mrs. Olson.
Okay.
She was quite a character.
She was not very nice.
Very temperamental, mouthy, gossipy,
And very uppity.
and uppity, yeah.
Yeah, she just kind of had an attitude, you know, but it was through the farmers around that kept them, you know, with business. You know, they needed to have food and clothing and that kind of stuff close by, so they were there, but very reluctantly. Yeah, her uppity attitude kind of came because they were from New York. And Nellie Olson, the real Nellie Olson, kind of was uppity too. But between Walnut Grove and Laura and her family moving out to DeSmet in Dakota Territory, they went out with the railroad because Pa was offered a railroad job. And so they could pay off their house and sell it in Walnut Grove and then move on to open prairie that Pa just dearly loved. But it wasn't but a few years later, Laura's in school and here comes a new girl into school and it's Nellie Olson in the real story. But their family had fallen on hard times too. How the hell are you? We're recording. So anyway, that was how this part of it got started, but they did go on to DeSmet also.
Well,
And then later-
in the long run, what happens with Nels and Mrs. Olson?
I don't know.
They just get old?
I thought they had gone back in the book called Laura there by Donald Zokert. He gives the background of a lot of the people that are not, whatever happened to them. I think they went back to New York and it was Nellie Olson that finally is gone to Louisiana and is buried down there. So they were able to find out her burial places. I didn't want to turn talking through it either.
No, we got it. I've got